All right, so you're wrestling with your hormones. Maybe you've removed sugar. Maybe you removed gluten. Maybe you even removed chocolate, which in that case, why would you do that to yourself? But listen, if there is one thing that you may have heard that is stupendously, horrendously, terribly bad for you, it's coffee. Or is it? It's precisely why I've produced this week's episode, to answer this life-altering question, but more specifically, how it pertains to women. And I can guarantee you that some of the facts that I'm going to be presenting today are going to absolutely, positively, 100% surprise you. And this is exactly why you're going to want to stay until the end. Are you ready? If so, let's do this. Melissa Ramos here, serving you up your dose of nutrition and Chinese medicine, a little bit of a twist in a classy, sassy, and a bit of a smartassy kind of way. Now listen, before I begin, I want to be able to remind you that one of the best ways that you can support me is to subscribe to this channel. And don't forget to smash that little bell button, that way you get notified every single time a new episode drops every Wednesday. And hey listen, I get it, you might be clutching onto that cup of coffee because you're burnt out, you've got shit to do. And because, well hey, murder is wrong. Now, if you're burnt out, well, you're in luck because I produced an entire adrenal fatigue repair kit, which will help you get back your energy in, no joke, as little as 7 days. You can grab that right now by clicking the link in the comments. All right, so let's face it. Understanding whether something is good or bad can be downright confusing, especially if you follow the news.
No correlation between coffee drinking and any form of cancer.
Coffee might cause cancer.
Less likely to die from heart disease.
More likely to suffer heart disease.
Make you hallucinate.
Up to 25 cups of coffee a day had no ill effects on your arteries.
This does seem to contradict a study that we told you about last month.
Ah, coffee, and then you recognize the fact that, ooh, it's going to kill me. What?
No wonder people are so damn confused. So first and foremost, why is something like coffee so good for us 1 minute and then bad for us the next? Well, for starters, publishing papers is necessary to becoming an academic, and researchers are pumping upwards to 5 studies per week. This is oftentimes more frequent than sex in an average marriage. First, these are epidemiological studies, which oftentimes removes context. There are vast differences in coffee's pharmacological constituents depending on the type of bean used in the study, the methods of roasting, and the varying ways of preparing coffee. Not to mention the differences between commercially available instant coffee versus organic, freshly ground coffee. Second, researchers who are vying for academia status are doing so no matter how invalid or valid the methodology is. And if you've ever heard me talk about testing, methodology matters. And lastly, researchers are relying on something called data fishing, which can be defined as a data mining practice in which large volumes of data are analyzed seeking any possible relationships between that data. In other words, this is literally the opposite of a scientific method, which begins with a hypothesis and then follows it through with an examination of that data. Now we realize that you're watching this thinking, but is coffee bad for me? Well, before we get to that, I have to point out that people are pretty specific with how they make their coffee, which is pretty important in this entire equation. Maybe your style is by using a French press. Maybe you like kicking it old school with a good old coffee machine. And maybe you love using those Keurig coffee pods, which in that case I have to ask you, who hurt you? Not only do those coffee pods produce a ton of waste because, by the way, they aren't biodegradable, they also have the potential to affect your health. Why? Because they may actually harbor mold, bacteria, and also they contain aluminum. And if you didn't know this already, both mold and aluminum are hormone disruptors, and they can drive up estrogen in the body. And just to be clear, mold and bacteria can also grow in good old coffee machines. So ask yourself, when was the last time that you cleaned your coffee machine? One way to consider doing so is by running extra strength white vinegar through it. But is coffee all bad? Of course not. For starters, it's actually extremely high in antioxidants. It improves circulation and blood flow to the brain, providing a hit of mental clarity.
What?
It can also improve our physical performance, and the caffeine in it can act as a thermogenic, helping us with our fat-burning potential, which, by the way, I will circle back about in just a bit. It also increases circulation to the liver. And there's some research to suggest that it can improve estrogen metabolism by upregulating the CYP1A2 isoenzyme. This CYP1A2 enzyme system is responsible for the initial metabolism of estrogen during phase 1, which is one of the 4 phases of liver detoxification. But if you're a woman who is taking oral contraceptives or postmenopausal hormone replacement therapy, you may want to know that these meds decrease how quickly your body breaks down caffeine, which can almost double the caffeine's half-life. half-life. During pregnancy, caffeine metabolism is also reduced, particularly in the 3rd trimester, but this generally returns back to normal several weeks after delivery. I also want to point out that genes also play a role in how quickly you're able to clear caffeine. You may make a lot of this enzyme needed to clear caffeine, or just a little bit. In fact, only 10% of the population makes this enzyme. Now, if you're like many of the women that I work with who may be wrestling with hormonal issues, you may be relying on just that 1 cup of coffee per day. The problem is that the caffeine in it can overstimulate the nervous system and the adrenals, and this certainly can impact the conversion of T4, your inactive thyroid hormone, to T3, your active thyroid hormone. Plus, drinking coffee can aggravate your blood sugar balance, leading to inflammation and a whole host of emotional reactivity. Blood sugar fluctuations causes cortisol spikes, which not only exhausts the adrenals, but it deregulates the immune system. This is highly undesirable for those of us with adrenal fatigue, hashimotos, or Graves' disease, because these cortisol spikes are also highly inflammatory. Coffee stimulates gastrin, which is the main gastric hormone that speeds up intestinal transit time. It can also stimulate the release of bile, which is why so many people run to the bathroom after drinking it.
Oh God, oh God, oh.
You okay in there? In a healthy digestive system, this isn't such a big deal, but because it's in my full belief that all hormonal and autoimmune conditions are rooted in the gut, you may be interested to know that coffee does have the potential to cause further digestive damage to the intestinal lining. Now I get it. You're probably watching this thinking, I'm anti-coffee, right? Far from the truth. I'm half Brazilian. I was born with that shit flowing through my veins. What? But I also understand that coffee's caffeine effects can last in the system for up to 12 hours. So having a cup of coffee, even at noon, can totally disrupt your sleep. Now, for those of you with adrenal fatigue, listen up. Because there's already so much stress on the system, it may be a good idea to give coffee a break because it could be compounding the problem. You see, when cortisol, the hormone released in response to stress, is constantly firing off, it will eventually consume progesterone, which is the hormone that helps us to feel good and nourished. This leads to seemingly uncontrollable feelings of feeling weepy one minute and then snapping the next.
What did you say to me?
This is also the reason why that you may not be reaping the fat-burning effects of coffee, because of the fact that it is exacerbating your adrenal fatigue and progesterone loss. This is the reason why it's double dog important if you are a lady over the age of 35 to really love and support your adrenals, because after the age of 35, your progesterone begins to decline naturally, so why expedite it? In the meantime, do you have iron deficiency anemia? Fibroids?
Yep.
Ovarian cysts?
Damn skippity.
Be careful with daily coffee consumption because coffee can inhibit the absorption of iron. And because it's inflammatory and can worsen adrenal fatigue, expediting progesterone loss, it can make those fibroids and ovarian cysts so much worse. Shit! And for my ladies out there who have bad PMS or swollen, painful breasts due to fibrocystic changes, watch out because it's one of the causative factors behind why you're experiencing breast pain, which is why I did not want my husband touching them in the past.
We're gonna go to bed without the boobies.
Yeah.
You get that?
No. Booby.
He didn't seem to get it. And yet still, with all this info, I still drink coffee. And I wanted to be able to share with you how, why, and when I drink it. First, I always buy organic because coffee is one of the most highly sprayed crops in the world. Second, because coffee can be quite moldy and the toxins produced from mold called mycotoxins can really drive up estrogen levels and wreak havoc on our hormonal health, especially our thyroid, I only buy brands which have inspected their crops for mold. Third, I only drink coffee on the weekends because I find that when I drink it every single day, it really impacts my nervous system and my adrenals.
What did you say to me?
Another reason why I only drink it on the weekends is because it can deplete adrenal-loving nutrients like vitamin C, magnesium, potassium, and many of your B vitamins. If you're wondering, is decaf a better option? Well, because it's lower in caffeine, it can be to a degree. You see, decaf coffee still impacts your digestive system like regular coffee, but the effects of it are reduced. Also, most decaf coffee is decaffeinated using toxic chemicals like methylene chloride. So if you do get decaf, make sure that it is naturally decaffeinated using a water or carbon dioxide extraction method. Fourth, anytime that I do consume coffee, I always add butter to it. So in other words, I butter my coffee. The reason for this is because it helps to thwart the jitteriness that I normally would experience, and it's easier on my gut. Plus, I find that the fat helps to be able to balance my blood sugar, preventing any crashing. And yes, if you're wondering, can you have this with coconut oil? Absolutely, if butter is simply not your thing. So yeah, I know. So is coffee good or bad for me, right? The answer is, well, it depends. If you're someone who has many of the conditions that I just mentioned in this video, then you may want to be able to give the coffee a break for 30 days. And if you're wondering, how on earth could I possibly do that? I've actually included 2 recipes for you in my adrenal fatigue repair kit. One, which is my matcha latte, and that way you can get a little bit of caffeine and all the creamy comfort that you would otherwise get in your cup of joe. And 2, I've also included my energizing hot chocolate recipe, which I am obsessed with and I love for that 2 p.m. crash. And lastly, if you're like me and you've done the work on your hormones, I do believe that you can actually enjoy a cup of coffee from time to time, but moderation is everything. So simply reserve it for maybe 2 to 3 times a week. Alright you, if you dug this video, then do me a favor right now, give it a thumbs up, make sure to tag a friend, leave me a comment, let me know what you thought, and don't forget to subscribe because new episodes launch every single Wednesday. I'll see you next time.